Bold. This episode today is What's in the Sauce. What's in the Sauce? It's about the Passover and Jesus and Judas' betrayal. And I want to talk about this because a lot of us have received some kind of betrayal in our life, and how to overcome that, or how to sort out Jesus or sort out God in those particular situations. And I want to talk about this because it becomes so evident for Judas in the Bible during this time at Passover, because you don't hear much about him other than he's carrying the knapsack and, Jesus' instruction, but you don't hear much about him doing anything until this moment at the Passover. And I looked in the Bible, there's like multiple interpretations of what had happened. When there's multiple people around, everyone has a different view of the scenario of what occurred. And I noticed that it was God's will all along for Judas to betray Jesus. It was God's will all along, for Jesus to go to the cross. So I reasoned that with my life, and I was trying to figure out, okay, are there things that are occurring in my life that were the will of the Father, that were, just had to be, that had to occur, regardless of what's happening, because Judas was Jesus' friend. I noticed in Psalm 41:9, it says, "Yeah, my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me." So there, Jesus trusted Judas. Clearly, in order to trust someone with your funds or your money, you have to have some kind of friendship or familiarity with them, or some kind of trust. So clearly, he trusted in him. And of course, Jesus foresaw this coming, and he foreknew that this was the will of the Father. But what I can't quite put my finger on that happens in this dipping of the bread, when everyone describes it, there was one description that said, as he dipped it, Satan entered Judas. And I want to talk to you guys about that. I had this other video talking about what's in you and the spirit that can overtake you. But for Satan to enter you and you're sitting there with Jesus, and I think this happens a lot oftentimes in the church, where you're a Christian and you're going to church and you're like, how can there be a demon? How can Satan take over my life? How can evil be with me? How can principalities and strongholds and bondage overtake me? If I'm at church, if I accepted Jesus as Lord of my life, if I'm a Christian, how is this happening to me? If it can happen to Jesus, it can happen to you as well. But you have to know the will of the Father. In John 6:39, and this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that of all which he hath given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. Sometimes we are falling. Sometimes we come short. Sometimes things happen in life that play a major key role in your life, whether it's a betrayal of a friend, whether it's a downfall, whether it's a milestone in your life. But God is going to take you up and keep you and raise you up on the last day, just as he did Jesus on the third day. Matthew 7:21. God talks about, I never knew you. Because sometimes we're doing all this dancing, we're doing all this singing, we're doing all these sacrifices, these prayers, we're doing these good works, charity, love, all of that. Help. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Even though Judas betrayed Jesus, I never see in the Bible where he actually attacked him physically. They say at the end, Judas pretty much killed himself or whatnot. But I want to talk about that because this speaks on forgiveness. Not only forgiveness, but understanding. Understanding that Satan entered Judas. It wasn't his plan. It was God's plan. It was God's will all along for Jesus to die on the cross. So there had to be an ultimate betrayal. Sitting at the Passover, he said, one of you will betray me. Allow me to read it. I'm going to read all three interpretations. It looks like John, Matthew, and Luke has a story about what had happened. Matthew 26:21. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Is it I? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him. But woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for him, that man, if he had not been born. And you might say to yourself, like, why is this sad thing happening to Judas? Like, what did he do? You don't hear anything in the Bible of him doing wrong until this very moment. In John 13:21-27, when Jesus had this said, he was troubled in spirit and testified, and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spoke of. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spoke. He then lying on Jesus' breast saith unto him, Who is it? Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop. And I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon. And after that sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do it quickly. I want to talk about that because even though Satan had entered him, and you hear a lot of people say it in court, like, you know, the devil made me do it or Satan made me do it. Did Satan have to enter into him in order to betray Jesus? You know, sometimes people are betraying Jesus on a daily basis when they're acting out in sin. And that's why salvation has come. But in this time, Jesus had not died after Judas had betrayed him. He had not died yet. He was still at the Passover, eating with him, you know. And sometimes you may have those people that betray you, and they're still acting out in love. Like, he gave him a kiss when he betrayed him. And you might say, like, the Bible tells us to guard our hearts. The Bible tells us, you know, to be watchful, you know, just to be ready at all times. It gives us that, but to be careful for nothing, to know that God ultimately has your back at the end of the day, you know. Now, no man at the table knew for what intent he spoke this unto him, for some of them thought because Judas had the bag that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things that we have need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. He then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. So Judas had the bag, and then now he's betraying Jesus. And here in Luke 22, now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and scribes thought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then entered Satan into Judas, being of the number of the 12. This is Luke's interpretation of what had happened. And he went his way and communed with the chief priests and captains, how he might betray him unto them. And they were glad and covenanted to give him money. Luke describes it as if the chief priests and the captains are like, you know, forcing him to do it. Everyone else talks about, at dinner, he already knew he was going to betray him. At dinner, this was already going to occur. At dinner, this was already the Father's will. I want to let you guys think or ponder on that, on how your life and any betrayals or any downfalls or anything that has occurred, and you're stuck on it, stuck in unforgiveness, you're stuck in not trusting people, or stuck in not clearly understanding what has happened, because that's an opportunity. It says, and he promised and sought opportunity to betray him, and unto them in the absence of the multitude. Then came the day of the unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. I like that, must be killed. Like, there was no other option for Jesus, which you see that at the Garden of Gethsemane where he's praying to God. You know, sometimes there is a will, and it's not always, I said the other day, bad results don't produce bad outcomes. So sometimes those bad results have to occur. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's working in our favor. It's working for our good. And what God does is he completes us into perfection. He's going to bring you into full completion and perfection. And how does he do that? With his plan and his working. And sometimes that requires things that look like a downfall, but they're not. And in this instance, this is what occurred. I want to speak to that on this day, you guys, because I noticed that I was just listening to a pastor earlier today, and he was talking about, you know, if you cut something off at the root, will it die? And I always think about the dahlia flower. it's a bulb. The dahlia flower, it's a bulb. And it's a bulb. I thought if the bulb was not there, that you can't grow it. But it's a perennial. It doesn't matter what season it is in, it's going to ultimately grow. But if you cut the bulb, you can still grow it if you have a seed. And I want to talk about this seed because, what's in the sauce, Jesus has faith. And ultimately, this is talking about his faith in the will of God, his faith in the plan of God, his faith in what God has for him in his life. And all you need is a seed to grow a dahlia flower, but most people use a bulb. But it doesn't matter what season it is in, it's going to ultimately grow because it's a perennial. Some people actually pull them up and uproot them and then plant them again for another season. And I know all of you might not be a dahlia flower, and your name might not be Dahlia. But I want to talk to you about the seed, because the seed is a mustard seed of faith. And if you have that, and if you could stand on that, you could get through anything. And that's what this story is talking about. Jesus succumbing and surpassing, the cross. And sometimes, you have your cross. You have whatever has occurred in your life, and it is your cross, and that you have to get over. And you have to have a seed of faith to succumb it or overtake it or overpower it. It's not, I think, an excuse for you to say a principality or a bondage or a yoke or a stronghold or to blame it on another person, because that's a result. You receive the result, now change the outcome. And not necessarily you have to change the outcome. The good outcome is in the plan. You just have to follow the plan by the details in which God is giving you. That's all I want to say today. Even though Satan entered Judas, it wasn't that Satan entered Judas. It was God's will and God's plan all along. And you have to find out what his plan is for your life and work it in the way that you work it. Mighty works will be done in the name of Jesus. Thank you guys for another episode of Humble to Bold. You can buy both of my books at www.dahliasafan.com and also the Flow TV on YouTube at Equipped by God on Instagram. Much love. Be blessed. God bless.